recording. Yes, okay. All right. It's all
Okay,
yours.
I'll take over screen sharing from you, Gunda.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome this morning to our guests and to our fellow Rotarians. Our program today will tell you a little bit about the journey we've had this last year for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and look at what we have learned, how we held the program. And then Dan Brown is also going to talk a little bit about what's next. After we've gone through this short PowerPoint, we'll also have a video that really brings diversity, equity, and inclusion home to us here in Gig Harbor, and indeed here to Rotary. Charlie Zartman, who has been so kind as to join us today. Charlie's granddaughter is Shayla Zartman, and Shayla is George Floyd's cousin. So we're going to see the story of Shayla that was part of Facing Race on King 5 a few months back. And then we'll be open for questions. So let's get started. We began our, how come it won't? Okay. Oh, here we go. There we go. When we began to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion for Rotary, because Rotary is an apolitical organization, we ask ourselves a basic question. Is racial justice, diversity, equity, and inclusion a Rotary issue? Because oftentimes it can turn into a political issue. And what we did as a group, and the group included the 3 Gig Harbor clubs, Morning Club, Midday, and North Club that meets at Heron's Key, and also the Key Peninsula Satellite Club. We used the 4-way test, the Rotary 4-way test, the basis, the foundation of thinking in Rotary to apply to this. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And without question, all of the people in the joint Rotary DEI group said, yes, the 4-way test is the foundational part and reason and purpose of why we are doing a diversity, equity, and inclusion program. So this is thoroughly grounded in Rotary. Rotary International this past year also came out with some statements. Their commitment is to build a better world where people unite to take action to create lasting change. Rotary values diversity and celebrates the contributions of all people of all backgrounds, regardless of age, ethnicity, race, color, abilities, religion, socioeconomic status, culture, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. So that is a good basis for it. This is not just a local political thing that people are looking at. This is a worldwide Rotary commitment. We set, when we began last July, we set down what really our vision was, what we would do going forward with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the clubs came up with the following statement. The real purpose here, to encourage kindness and respect from the heart towards everyone in order to bring about true equity and celebrate diversity for all. And for that to happen, we must embrace empathy and compassion for others, education and self-reflection, and celebration of our growth in learning as Rotarians. In 2018, Midday Club came up with our #1 goal was diversity. And we developed some guiding principles. And what I've done, this has not been approved by anyone, if you will, but this is kind of a guideline of guiding principles that we would use, recognizing that diversity makes us stronger, that we are going to be and will be inclusive, opening, to all and welcoming all, respecting each other, including and especially in our differences, being mutually respectful of our life experiences. Practicing a culture of kindness, providing education programs, creating and promoting programs that really will support diversity, equity, and inclusion. If we simply gather and talk, or we've got a small group of people that are the choir and we're trying to preach to the choir, we're not going to be able to expand the DEI program. So we really wanted to look at ways that we can create programs that will support diversity. Actively seek to build community partnerships. Dan just mentioned the Gig Harbor for Racial Justice Coalition, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that in a moment. And importantly, to expect best intentions and being open to feedback and positive criticism. Our program consisted again of the 3 Gig Harbor clubs and Key Peninsula Satellite Club. Our goal was to educate our members and our clubs. And we met every 2 weeks. We started last July. We started with the history and foundation of racism in America. We went through current issues such as reparations and voting rights, and new Jim Crow. We also brought in speakers from Gig Harbor. We talked to the chief of police, the school district about public policy and what is our hiring policy for diversity, equity, and inclusion here in Gig Harbor. And the intention was to educate our club members so that we might be part of educating our community for diversity, equity, inclusion, and racial justice. And at that point, that's kind of the foundation of what we had. So Dan, I'm going to hand it over to you now. Dan headed up the book and video group, and you can take it from there, Dan.
Okay, thanks, Dan. So we've read, I think we just finished our 9th book, but I've chosen these books and with some input so that we can hit all the different categories. So we started off with white fragility and then how to be an anti-racist, and we just finished up a couple books about the indigenous people and their plight. And now we're on in the middle of the Japanese internment policy. So we just finished a book called Infamy. I know you probably can't all see this, but we just finished our book discussion on infamy about the Japanese internment camps. And, you know, I have to say that before I go on is that personally, as I was growing up, going through high school and even college, I didn't know any of this stuff. I mean, it just wasn't taught. And I was just watching a special on CNN about the massacre in Tulsa, and the current mayor of Tulsa, even though his family had history there, and he didn't know about it. He wasn't taught about this. So, you know, a lot of these things are not being taught in our schools. And as adults, I think it's, you know, for me personally, I think it's my responsibility to learn about it, even though sometimes it gets kind of uncomfortable. And but I think it's important for me to learn, and not just from the books and the movies, but also from people, talking to people. I think I've been blessed to have a lot of people in my life that have really taught me a lot. You know, Thelma in particular, my best friend in California, Larry Silvers, he came on one of our Zoom meetings one time, excuse me. Just, you know, talking to people and some of the pain that they've gone through really, really helps to understand, you know, this whole DEI concept. So, you know, to me, it's real important that we learn and educate ourselves. And from there, we can, you know, become more empathetic and, you know, maybe take action in the future. So we've read a lot of good books. Our next book is I'm not sure if it's considered a classic as a bestseller, but it's called Hotel on the Corner of Bitter and Sweet. It's a fictional book, but it takes place in a real area, or a real hotel, the Panama Hotel in Seattle. So it's a really good book from what I've heard. It's a quick read, so I'm hoping people will join. I'll send out the dates for those. for that book discussion. But in the future, after we finish this topic, I want to move on to women's rights, the whole women's movement, which is really important, the whole history of that, and then LGBTQ plus, that topic, disabled Americans, our vets, another important topic. Maybe even hit religions, the anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and even ageism. I mean, there's so many topics we can cover, and I'd like the group to help participate and find books and movies, things that can really help us, to educate ourselves and become more aware. So our videos have been really good. This last one really hit me strongly. It was called Children of the Camps. For those, I know I sent this memo out to everyone, but for those who didn't receive it, it was a documentary about these, I think, six adults. They're all in their 70s and 80s. They were children of the camps, the internment camps back in the 1940s. And they still hold a lot of pain. I mean, it was really moving. It was more of a retreat to kind of let their feelings out and let them talk about it. And just some of the atrocities that they went through and how it's kind of stuck with them all these years. Those are kind of things that really, really, for me personally, affected me. And again, I think it's important for us to tackle these uncomfortable conversations and discussions, but very important. So those are some of the things that we're going to do in the future, and I hope we can get more participation. I know everyone's busy, and I understand that. I just keep hoping that we'll get more people involved and have really good discussions. Okay, Dan.
Could I just add one thing on that?
Yeah.
The books that we read, most all of us, although fortunately we do have some racial diversity within our Rotary clubs, but most of us grew up in protected white fragility, if you will.
Right.
And the books, absolutely, white fragility, some people don't like it because, quite frankly, it exposed our soul. It really helped me to see how in my life, from my position of white privilege, I had been racist without knowing it. And then as we read into Caste by Isabel Wilkinson, helped to really understand how racial injustice became embedded in our nation. And so these books have really been eye-opening. Sometimes they've been difficult to read, but they challenge us. And I think that was one of the important things that we wanted to do, was to challenge our thinking. Okay. Just to kind of give you the journey that we took over the last almost year. We began sharing, of course, where we were, what our thoughts were. We heard voices of people who were very much affected by racial injustice, our own Rotarians, and really gave us some eye-opening understanding of the experiences that they have experienced right here in Gig Harbor. So it was really eye-opening to begin that. And we began our journey then by going back to 1619. We found videos. YouTube is just a treasure of videos about the Atlantic slave trade, how this all started, what life was like on a slave ship. We found videos with recordings of slaves that were made by former slaves that were made in the 1930s, and to hear their voices of what it was like to be a slave in America was just eye-opening and just gut-wrenching. We went through the era of Reconstruction, through Jim Crow, the era of the Green Book and lynchings. We looked at civil rights, Martin Luther King, and we looked at the lives of civil rights champions. We looked at voting rights to ask, is voting rights a political issue or is it a white fragility issue? John Lewis was just amazing to listen to. Voter suppression, looking at the bills that, quite frankly, the bills going through Texas right now use the same words from the Constitution of Texas that was written to prohibit people of color from voting and women from voting. We looked at the topic of reparations, which is becoming more and more an issue. And then we began to look at our own backyard. Tacoma had a wonderful video, how we got here, that went through the history of Tacoma and racial discrimination and oppression that occurred right here. The Chinese, I don't want to call it a massacre, but it literally ran every Chinese person out of town. The Japanese internment, Native American, if you look at the map of the Puyallup tribe before and after treaty, it was just eye-opening how much was taken from the Puyallup tribe. And we looked at Black American discrimination in our area, the process of redlining, where we actually looked at the maps that were redlined in Tacoma. Just an amazing journey, but it was a journey that allowed us to see how this all began to come together and where we are today. So Dan, you want to mention a little more some thoughts on what's next and where we go from here?
Well, I just mentioned all the books that we want to, our next book and the different topics. So again, I'm hoping that people will participate, and then after we see the video today, I can share a few more thoughts about some of the things I've read about high schools. One in Bellevue, one in my old high school, Gonzaga Prep in Spokane. Some of the stuff that has gone on there and what they're doing about it. And also I can share with what our school district is doing to support DEI. So I can say that after the video if we have time.
Okay, all right. For our Midday Rotarians, the program we put together for the Midday Club, and each club could handle things differently. Each week for the last year, we've held a DEI moment where we've looked at many of the videos that I just mentioned, and each week learned a little bit more about the racial injustice in this country. We wrote a couple articles for the district newsletter, got today's presentation, and then members of the Midday Club and of the Rotary Coalition have joined the Gig Harbor for Racial Justice Coalition. And Dan, perhaps a little bit later on, you can mention a little more about that.
Okay.
We covered Juneteenth. I hope you will be able to participate in that. There are different groups that have different areas throughout Gig Harbor where they'll be holding signs along the roads, as well as the virtual celebration with Aaron Jones. Okay, let's look now at the journey of Shayla.
Shayla. Yeah.
And let me get back up. Shayna lived here in Gig Harbor, and Charlie, I hope you're going to be able to tell us some of the good things that have happened for Shayna in the last few months. But grew up here, attended
Seatown Electric Plumbing, Heating and Air is Washington's preferred contractor.
grew up here, attended Peninsula High School, and just an amazing story. I'm sorry we ended up with the commercial here, but we'll drop that now. Okay.
Everyone else in the country as a Minneapolis police officer killed her cousin. Tonight,
We're going to start that again.
A fire has been set off inside my soul.
This young woman watched, along with everyone else in the country, as a Minneapolis police officer killed her cousin. Tonight, the untold story of George Floyd's family who lives in Western Washington.
When you are a family member of a victim of police brutality, you're like stamped with that forever.
After Floyd's death, she joined the fight against systemic racism, but she also realized she was fighting a battle within herself.
Felt for a long time as though I was not black enough to be black, but I wasn't white enough to be white.
Hers is just one story that represents millions of multiracial Americans struggling to find where they fit in.
A powerlessness of knowing that I can't change the skin that I'm in.
Race and ethnicity, they're complicated. On the latest census, we were given 5 options to identify our race, with an additional box of 2 or more races. Good evening, thanks for joining us. I'm Joyce Taylor. And tonight we're talking about identity and the complications that come with being multiracial in America. In the 2010 census, 61% of those who marked they were 2 or more races on the form also said they did not identify as multiracial. So what does that mean? Let's say a person who is half white and half Asian may identify as only white. Sometimes how a person identifies depends on more than just their family tree. It can vary depending on how they look, what family members they're close to, and who raised them. In the next 40 years, the number of people who identify as multiracial is expected to triple. Well, some multiracial people spend their lives searching for their true identities, and sometimes it takes a pivotal moment. And that's exactly what happened to one biracial Washington woman, who reporters Kristen Ayers and Taylor Murphy-Dureski met. What you're about to watch is a story 5 months in the making, a life-changing 5 months.
Black Lives Matter! We're about to go to a march.
Our streets! You are a person, you are a person, you are a person, I am a person. George Floyd was a human being. He did not deserve to die that way. We gotta make a change. It starts right here, but we gotta go out into the world and keep shouting and keep telling them that we are here and we're not gonna back down.
It wasn't even that I wanted to speak. It wasn't even that I wanted to have the attention on me or anything like that. It's that I want to be a part of the movement that's going to change the world. All these people are here for the same reason, to say, like, enough is enough.
Mama, I love you. I think we are good.
We saw him struggle. We saw him ask, beg for his life. And they said, nope. There's nothing that could ever prepare you for the moment that you see that.
I can't breathe.
I could feel him knowing that he was about to die. It happened in 8 minutes and 46 seconds, but this I will be going through for the rest of my life.
Say his name!
My name is Shayla Zartman. I'm 22 years old from Gig Harbor, Washington, and I'm George Floyd's cousin.
We met Shayla Zartman in July at this protest in Lakewood, just 1 week after she gave that speech about George Floyd in Minneapolis.
I can't breathe!
It had been less than 2 months since his killing in May set off a global fight for racial justice and turned Shayla into an activist.
I am at the March on Washington right now. Just felt like if I just went to protest, if nothing else, you know, I could talk to people. I think that with George's death, it allowed me to realize within myself that I have the power to talk to a lot more people.
I'm here for George, but I'm here for the other people whose names aren't as loud.
At protests, talking comes easy, but talking to her white family about her cousin's killing and her own racial reckoning would be something else entirely.
My mom has not made any comments about it at all. She has not posted anything. I just find that very interesting still that she hasn't said anything. Even my speech that I had in Minneapolis, she didn't repost it. It's difficult being caught in the middle. That's where I've spent my entire life.
Shayla had only met her cousin George a couple of times, but his killing reignited a years-long battle within herself.
I felt for a long time as though I was not black enough to be black, but I wasn't white enough to be white. And so trying to figure out where I fit in was a struggle for me.
I do love you. I love you too, Mother.
I grew up with my white mom and my white sister, who is 6 years younger than me, and I lived with them my whole life. And then my dad lives in South Dakota, and he's black. I was an honors student. I was a swim team captain, water polo captain, and I played basketball.
On the surface, it seemed Shayla was living a picture-perfect life in Gig Harbor, a wealthy maritime city with a waterfront straight off of a postcard.
I would say that it is a lot of white, old, rich people.
In a city where 90% of the residents are white, Shayla stuck out.
Just picture you going to school and you sit down in your class, in your little desk, and you look around and 100% you are the only person who looks like you. Your hair, your skin color, like the actual physical color of you, your freckles, your eyes. I had a phase where I'd straighten my hair, cover up my freckles. If I try to assimilate to the white community, then I will be accepted. This is my journal. Hi, my name is Shayla Zartman. I am 10 years old. Reading this, it's just like a little kid wanting to have like a friend to talk to. I want long hair and a tiny body. I feel like a 30-year-old stuck inside a 13-year-old's body. Not a very attractive body either. I'm just living. I'm the tall chick with the afro, nothing more. Trying to come into my race, my identity, trying to figure out who I was. I feel like that's probably definitely one of the things I kept inside because there was no one around me who would have understood. Even if I did want to talk about it, there wasn't anyone.
Grasping for her identity in grade school, Shayla cut off her hair and dressed as Martin Luther King Jr. for a school project. With no one to teach her about Black history, she taught herself. It wasn't until she was 10 that she would meet her father, and when she did...
One of the first things my dad ever said to me was, "Oh my God, look at how white you are." When I'm meeting him and wanted to connect to the Black side of me, it's very degrading to the experience that I was trying to capture.
Hello.
Hello.
Sometimes he still gives her a hard time about fitting in.
She ain't black. She ain't black.
Well, see, that's the thing is that for you, when I'm around the family, when I'm around other Black people, I'm not Black.
Her mom, Kendra, rarely acknowledged that Shayla was Black either.
People are people, and there was no black, white, or anything. I don't recall ever having very blunt, straightforward conversations about her race.
I found myself definitely with my white side of my family not wanting to talk to them as much because I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to upset them. I don't want to get in a fight with them. And now I'm like, why do I do that? I'm making them comfortable so I can live my entire existence being uncomfortable, being scared. I don't think so. I think it's time for everyone to be a little uncomfortable.
So in some ways, I feel like I grew up white, like I was supposed to be a white kid. I didn't know anything about my Blackness until I went and found it for myself. So whether that be my hair, my family, or even knowing more about slavery and what actually happened, I've gone to a segregated school my entire life. Did you realize that?
I don't have anything to say about that.
It's not bad. I went to great schools. It's hard for me because how much did I lose by doing that, by being in these white schools?
How much did you gain?
I know it was to keep me safe. You were never doing it intentionally. You guys just saw me as Shayla and wanted me to have the best life, and so did what you thought was best for me.
Absolutely. My only issue with what you just said is the word segregated. It was not an all-white school.
Okay, we're not an all-white school. We have 5 black people.
Shayla and I really, really struggle to have good conversations about these really difficult subjects.
Do you know why I always FaceTime you when I get pulled over?
Just so that there's video evidence of what's happening.
And it's also because if I get arrested, I want you to know where I am,
where you're going,
what happened,
right,
so you can get me out.
I've never had to think about any of that. I didn't know to worry for you until
I got scared?
Yeah, essentially, until you got scared. I didn't know to worry for you. To hear you say that it's been difficult for you to find who you are, your blackness, who that black woman inside of you is, it's hard for me. Are you mad at me and Grandma and Grandpa for bringing you up in a essentially white world? There's been a few things that you've said that I've wondered, did I make mistakes?
How could you have possibly known? There are things that you will never be able to understand. In a way, I guess I resent that.
It was the first time that either of us had been very open and honest with each other about mistakes and misunderstandings and how this affected her as a black person being raised by a white mom. I think that she's in pain.
Sorry.
I think she's angry.
It's so hard.
I think she's hurt.
And growing up, how are you supposed to explain to a kid what racism is and how people are gonna hate you for nothing? How are you supposed to explain that to a child? How are you supposed to explain when she goes to school and people call her dirty and call her ugly because she's brown?
I did not realize the depth of it until all of this happened.
Until George died.
Until George died. Yeah.
Tragedy, trauma does bond people, just in the fact that nobody else understands what you're going through. Brought me closer with my family in general.
At George's funeral, Shayla stood shoulder to shoulder with her black family, and in them, perhaps for the first time, she saw herself.
I'm so deeply sorry for her entire family's loss, but something good has come out of it. She's just like a renewed person. She's not afraid to say, this is how I feel, this is who I am, this is wrong.
But we come together, they can't stop us. They really
can't. I think you have found yourself, not only as a woman, but as a black person.
It's interesting for me to grow up all this time feeling like I wasn't black enough because I wasn't in the community. I'm part of the black community because I've been through this trauma that, you know, is directly related to being black.
A consequence of her cousin's killing that Shayla never saw coming.
I know that I am a black woman now. I'm able to commemorate this growth that I've had as far as my racial identity, the struggle that I've been dealing with for so long.
I wanted a picture of a black woman, to have that black woman in her full God body, that is one that has a big nose and big lips and a big fro, because those are the things that have been oppressed out of and told that they were not beautiful for so long. Looking down, and it's a daily reminder, you are that beautiful woman that you want to be. It's interesting for me to grow up all this time feeling like I wasn't black enough because I wasn't in the community. I'm part of the black community because I've been through this trauma that, you know, is directly related to being black. That's what being black is. It's having that heart and that resilience to take life at its worst and to still do your best and make it what you can.
We spoke to Shayla for more than 40 hours. In a digital exclusive we're calling Enough, Shayla takes us deeper into her journey and her struggles to be accepted by both the white and black sides of her family. Text the word enough to 206-448-4545.
Well, thank you very much for being here for this presentation. And what an amazing story of an incredible young woman. And since then, Charlie mentioned to me the other day that there are some good things that have happened to Shayla. Would you like to share those, Charlie?
Sure. You don't get the full impact of how impressive a young woman Shayla is. Can you hear me now, everybody? Yeah. Yep. She's 6 foot tall. She's a large woman with a lot of charisma. She looks you in the eye when she talks to you. And it's just she's a born leader, I think. And now she's found out, as it said there just before the end, who she is and what she wants to do. So she's going to college now. She visited her families in the course of all these protests all over the country, in Washington, D.C., and Fayetteville, North Carolina, Houston, and whatnot, and did the protests. But since that, she's decided that she's going to go to college. She went back to revisit some of the relatives in Raleigh, North Carolina in the fall, and decided that, she really liked it there. She felt very comfortable there. She got a job there. She's been taking courses through Central Washington in Ellensburg as basic courses. And now she's registered at one of the branches of the University of North Carolina that's in Raleigh, that has one of the best courses in the country, of course, according to her research, in racial justice. And she plans to get a degree there. So I'm hoping that this will happen and that she will really do something rather than just the protesting, which really doesn't have any end result that you can really see as you can perhaps with a proper education. So we have great hopes and just hope this works out for her very much.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for sharing that. Questions for either Dan or myself?
Go ahead, Catherine.
This is not a question as much as it's just a comment. And this program that you, the Dans, our para-Dans, have done is the most moving thing I've ever seen in Rotary. It makes me so proud. I have not been able to be a part of a lot of it for multiple reasons, but the atrocities, right now we're just being immersed in Greenwood. I've read many of the books that you've read, but what I want to say is thank you. Thank you for the hard work that you both put into this. Thank you for forcing us to open our eyes. Some of us have had a little bit of prejudice. I have had some myself, but I just want to say to you two men, you have been a role model for the entire Rotary International for how you've handled this. And I'm so proud of you. I'm so grateful to you for all that you've done to make us look at this issue more seriously. So thank you.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, going back to our school district, actions are taking place. This trauma, this George Floyd murder, this death of him, has really spurred a lot of people to take action in our school district. Just hired a new superintendent, and I was on a Zoom meeting with her, and she's all for DEI. She's 100% into it. The committee that Thelma and I belong to for the district DEI, they are organizing. What their goal is, and it may take money, it may take support from our new school board, is to have a kind of like a coalition at each school site to support kids of color. And, because, they do go through a lot. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that. It's, if you're the only African-American kid in a class and, you're looking around and, you feel, you feel alone. And, these kids, they do need support. They need to know that people are there for them. And if there are problems, they know people will have their back and they'll take care of things. And so I'm very hopeful for that. All the administrators have gone through training or going through training. They're trying to train more and more of the teachers and racial biases and, DEI topics. So that is going strong. And so I'm hopeful that our school district is taking the right steps.
I have a question, Dan. Can I ask a question? This is a little bit confusing to me. We hear a lot about assimilation. You hear that word a lot, like people come and they need to assimilate. And I know in our district, we might not have a lot of people from the Black community. We are certainly improving in that area, but we do have a lot of Guatemalans and a lot of people from certain Asian countries that have come over with English as a second language, that sort of thing. Do you know if the district, because that's really the most constant point of contact that kids will have, do you know if they are working on celebrating different cultures or creating one culture? I'm confused about where all this is going.
Yeah. Well, the only thing I do know is that they are changing their curriculum. The history curriculum is being changed to include more cultures. I'm hoping that they'll do more celebrations of the different cultures. I think that's, the people on the committee, that's their hope too. So again, we just hope that the administrators throughout the district will take that challenge and celebrate the different cultures and teach about the different cultures. So, I think that's going to happen. I just, it's going to take time though. It's going to take time.
Well, thank you again for being part of the program. And Charlie, I just want you to know that seeing that video of Shayla, it makes me so proud of her and the journey that she's taking. So thank you for coming today to fill us in.
Well, I'm just trying to support her with her goals.
Thank you, Charlie. And thank you, guests from Heron's Key for joining us. And with that, Gunda, it's back to you.
Thank you, both Dans and everybody else. It was a remarkable program. And I must admit, when we started with our DEI group, I mean, it was like almost a year ago. And then you said, well, I don't know what I'm doing. But it turned out you knew what you were doing. I mean, you have done a marvelous job. I mean, you asked, I want a DEI moment in every single meeting, and you got it. I said, oh my God, yes, we'll get DEI. The articles got into the 50/20 newsletters and today's presentation. I'm absolutely impressed. Yeah, you didn't know what you were doing then. I think you were the right person at the right time, at the right moment. Thank you for all the things you have done. Both Dans, both of you, really wonderful program. And I'm looking forward to continue it. And it's just wonderful, wonderful job. So really, thank you so much. Great things going on. So we have a little bit of time. I think we can do Happy Bucks. Who wants to do Happy Bucks? Our happy girl is in the mountains, probably hiking somewhere in Santa Fe. So maybe Steve Rainbow, you just want to get the hands raised, and I will put $10 in honor of the DEI program today, and we'll give it to the food bank.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Right, who would like to give $10? Okay, I'm going to be slow here. So we got Dan B.
Okay, I can probably call them out for you.
And
Catherine comments. Catherine. Tamis Green. And Dave Stave. Paul Rushka. And Steve Rainbow. Did I miss anybody? I think that's it, yeah.
I would like to give also, but I also want to say thanks to these guys. We had that wonderful happy hour last week at Tamas's house, and we had the Brumbergs were there, and Llewellyn and her husband, and Jenny and Jenny Wellman and her husband, and Jay and I. And that DEI discussion entered into our happy hour. And I think we would all agree we had a very interesting and productive conversation. So you're making a difference by igniting this level of interest in people, and it is really making a difference. So thank you.
And by the way, Lee, and I have to apologize. I didn't even know you were there as guests, but you know, Lee and Elaine, thanks for coming. You know, didn't recognize as guests before because you are here all the time. So I thought you were regulars, right? And I know we got your application. Thanks for applying for membership. We'll get you inducted very soon. Thanks for coming. Anything else? Anybody else? Well, we have 5 more minutes unless you want to go home early and do whatever you need to do. Do your garden work or lie in the sun. Nice seeing everybody.
Question, Dan, is there any possibility we could get the link to that video? Can you send?
I have taped everything and I will put it out on YouTube, which reminds me I should